This episode is brought to you by TaxAct. Don't do your taxes alone. Join TaxAct's National Admin Night. Admin nights are social gatherings for getting through your to-do list. So get ready for a night of fun, finding deductions, and filing taxes with TaxAct, where you can file your federal and state return for just $49 through April 8. Let's get together and get them over with. Visit taxact.com/admin-night for details.
This episode is brought to you by Fandango. People say fans are too distracted these days, but the truth is, when a great movie hits the screen, you show up, you stay glued, invested, part of the story. And without fans like you, there'd be no cinema magic, no shared moments. So head to Fandango.com to get tickets, stream, or rent or buy top movies and series. Fandango loves fans.
Three, two, one. Welcome to another Britflix.com podcast. My name's Stuart Wright, and this week's guest is producer Alexandra Bentley. She's already appeared a couple of times before, almost a decade ago. Jesus. Where does that time go, Alex?
What?
First alongside Phil Hawkins in February 2016, and then with fellow producer Jen Andoff in the May of the same year. So this is your debut solo appearance. Welcome to the show, Alexandra Bentley.
Thank you for having me. Yes, I can't believe it's been that long.
Yeah,
it's a bit depressing, but
I can't believe I've been doing a podcast that long.
Well done. Yes, that is congrats.
Indeed. So your career began in film distribution, working for major studios like Warner Brothers and 20th Century Fox before transitioning into producing. You've made several feature films, all of which have enjoyed worldwide releases. You also produce commercials and video games, including the BAFTA-nominated interactive drama game As Dusk Falls. In addition, you are a senior lecturer leading a variety of MA-level producing modules. But today, we're here to talk about another feather in your cap, the book Producing Film and Television, First In, Last Out, published by Routledge. Congratulations, first and foremost.
Thank you. Yes, it feels a little bit surreal to have. We have been talking about writing this book for quite some time. To actually have it in my hands is wonderful. I co-wrote it, so to be very accurate, I wrote the film section, and my co-author Steve Pinhay wrote the TV section, and we put it together. I have not ventured into TV. I feel a little better equipped now that I co-authored a book about producing TV, so I know a lot more about it through research. But yes, I focused on film, he focused on TV. We put it together, and Routledge were kind enough to put it out there. So yeah.
Indeed. Now, before we're going to delve into the book first, but we will also be talking, you will also be sharing 3 films that have impacted everything in your adult life too. Does that sound like what you've signed up for?
It does indeed.
The book covers all, as you've sort of half explained now already, all types of television and film production, including drama, documentary, entertainment, comedy, and children's programming. It's a step-by-step guide with some first-hand insights and unique checklists, which we'll get onto later, something I want to ask you about. Gives a brilliant behind-the-scenes look. It's aimed at students, recent graduates, and or seasoned professionals looking to change direction. And it's a book that promises to help you break into film and television or take your career to the next level. So with that in mind, there are a lot of books about our industry. Certainly as a screenwriter, there is a mountain of screenwriting books. Not as many about the practical aspects of it. And certainly a lot of the practical ones tend to focus on kit and things. So what was it about the book marketplace were? And obviously we've said you work in education, so you're teaching already. So what did you think was missing in the book market that this book fills?
That's such a good point that you raised already. The market is saturated with books about 2 things, screenwriting and directing. And it feels like filmmaking is those 2 things. And most people think of it as that. If you just stay the name, I'm a filmmaker. Where does your craft comes from? And actually producing is such a core part of that trifecta, and you can't really have the other two without the producer. So I felt, we both felt through teaching for many, many years that there aren't enough books about producing. And we actually even went to Foyles and Waterstones just to see, okay, what is currently out there. And there was, at the point that we went, which was probably 2 years ago, there were none. So none in the current sort of published cycle.
Yeah.
So we decided to write a proposal. And we made a list of our top publishers to approach, and Routledge were at the top. And so I'm thrilled that they were the ones that said yes pretty much straight away, which I was shocked because obviously we did a ton of research about writing a book proposal and then putting it together to actually then have a yes, something that I'm not used to as a producer, constantly faced with no's from, agents to financiers to, I had to read that email many times over. And the other part of it was that the only books that exist that you could, let's say, go online, go on Amazon to look for on the subject of producing were very much written and geared towards the US.
Yes.
As if obviously that was the only place you make films and the only way you can be a producer, which obviously we know is not true. And the market in the States is vastly different to how we approach things in the UK and Europe. So we felt like there is a real gap there, something that the publisher very much agreed with us on. And that made the process a lot easier because we identified a gap that was proven to be there. And hence...
Yeah. I mean, a previous guest I've had Tony Morrison, who did the filmmaker's legal guidebook, which he took the same approach, which was there's a lot of Hollywood-based books offering legal advice to filmmakers and producers, but not one with a more UK bias. And that was the gap he was filling. So yeah, carry on.
Yeah, and we now really want to be making more films in the UK. The government is definitely trying to help there. I don't know whether they're going far enough with the funding in terms of regional and national lottery funding that, in many other countries, especially in Europe, there is a real push for films made within the country using using filmmakers there. Whereas we do have support. Obviously, there is amazing organizations like the BFI, but I don't think the government gives them as much money as one would need to really make this happen. And it's one of the things that we talk about. And the other part of it is television. And again, it feels like there are a lot of books about TV drama, again, as if that was the only format on TV. Yet there is, things that are governed by their own rules. Talk shows, game shows, children's TV. And sometimes they're very lo-fi. They don't actually have big budgets behind them. But some of them have got fantastic ideas behind them. And as a format, they are very well-oiled machines. So we wanted to also cover those so that especially next generations can have the full cookbook of the various parts. Yeah.
I was listening to an interview with somebody who was, I can't remember what comedian it was, but they were a host of a quiz show, and they said, "Oh, we used to love doing this because we could do 8 every day," and the person we're talking to going, "Only 8."
Yes, indeed. Yeah, they really are a conveyor belt. Extremely well organized, and you've got whole studios geared towards doing these, and I think there is a certain ease for presenters knowing exactly what they're getting into, so I can appreciate their answer, but from the actual production point of view, they can be quite complex to pull off, and obviously casting is so important, and the contestants, and the art department. There are so many parts of it. And then the format can sell around the world. And there are little things like maybe the jingle from one game show can actually make that composer a ton of money because it's then licensed to all these different countries. So yeah, it's quite interesting.
What would you say are 3 common mistakes or lessons you've learned that you've put into the book that you're hoping aspiring producers can avoid if they were to utilize your book properly?
That is such a good question. I mean, I would start by saying read the book, because there wasn't this resource. So I think actually we covered this quite early on. Being aware of the whole industry rather than just loving films is very important. I think producers tend to either focus on the craft of filmmaking and really loving the story and following that passionately, which is great. And that is so important. But if you don't have awareness of the business side of it, you will not succeed. And it is as simple as that. So having an understanding of the fact that you're still dealing with a product. It's maybe not a physical product you can touch, but it's still a product.
Yeah.
And treating it as such. So it needs to go through its development phase, and it also then needs to be sold. So those are things, the bookends of that, which alludes to our title. We are the first in and we're the last out. And it's so important and how do we immerse ourselves in the industry? We reading trade press. I always say this to students, starting early on, when the articles, sometimes the names, the companies won't really make sense to you because they all names you've not heard of. Actually making notes of all of those. And then after a few months of reading, you start seeing the connections like, oh, so-and-so was head of this and now they're here. Oh, now this person is financing. They used to work in sales. So it's all of those things that only through experience of reading and hearing what's out there, you will get. Festivals are another important part, attending as many as you can, those that are local to you, if you can travel somewhere, and meeting filmmakers and really hearing their stories and hearing what mistakes they made. And I think the best lessons that I've learned were from fellow producers.
Right.
And asking, and a few times when I was on the brink of making a decision, for example, which sales agent I should go with, I phoned a couple of producers that I didn't know. I've never met them. I managed to get their contact details, one through their agent, one through a person I knew. And they were with 2, each one had a different sales agent. And I just asked them, what do you think? Those answers informed my decision ultimately. So I think doing your due diligence on every single step of the journey is so important. And yeah, speaking to as many people, hopefully smart people, but also those that maybe, the less smart also give you some lessons. So it's good to just learn.
No, totally. I mean, I remember I taught for a year with concept and story development with first and second year undergraduates. And an exercise I used to do with them was box office, sort of one week to the next. So we'd look at what's coming out, and then the week after we'd see how they performed. And while I think not many of them could understand why we were doing it, but by the end of it, they begun to see, as you say, it starts off quite abstract, and then you begin to notice the pattern and understand where you might fit in, and also what type of film you might want to make.
Exercise. And how quickly the films fall off the cliff.
Yeah.
You might have a film that has got all the publicity and it's there 1 week, and 2 weeks later it's gone because you have 10 screen cinema, and each week you might have 5-6 new films coming out. I feel like it's not as crazy as it used to be a few years ago before COVID. I mean, the screens are saturated. There is plenty of new products coming in, especially obviously US releases and studio films, maybe, let's say. But yeah, that is one of the best exercises, I would say, that you can give to any, whether it's directors, screenwriters, or producers, to really understand what's happening in the business.
Given the practical nature of the book, what do you remember being the most challenging aspects of producing to nail down so people could make practical sense of it from your book?
Say probably finance. Okay. Because it's the chapter that a lot of people will be going to first, maybe, thinking, oh, we don't, how do we actually get the money for the film? So we knew it's going to be very important. And that's on the TV side, that's film commissioning. So we've covered them for both. But I think there are so many nuances to the type of finance that you get for your film and the consequences of that in terms of how much of the film you actually get to own and, then benefit from. And, as I now know the mistakes I made when I was first starting out, basically signing all the rights away, just being thrilled that we got the equity to make the film. And, that's a lesson learned, but it was worth it. So it's not like that's necessarily a mistake. You just need to understand what the terms mean and how those elements will impact you for many years. After. So, and we cover each one of those. So, including building a finance plan and how to approach it. So I feel like we've done it justice. And it has gone through, the book has gone through peer reviews, but then I also did my own peer review with different producers and financiers that looked at specific chapters. So I would send the finance chapter to a couple of financiers that I trust to get their take and input. And there was a lot of redlining and a lot of, no, but I think we could do this. And so I think the final product for now captures what the finance opportunities are in the UK.
Indeed. I remember being lucky enough. I was sat at a table at a dinner one year for Inside Pictures, the development program for film executives, and people were, as certainly the producers around the table, as would naturally be, were sort of bemoaning how difficult it was to raise finance for a movie. And then somebody around the table who was sort of one of the mentors there was saying, yeah, but it was also difficult 20 years ago as well. I think it's always been difficult. Was the kind of, it's sort of with hindsight, because what you see get made, you think that was easy, but you're not seeing all the projects that didn't get made, which is the challenge that you're always facing in the here and now. One thing that the book, you start off the book sort of what is producing, who is a producer, and I think it's safe to say the producer is many things. A producer does many things. And depending on the scale of the project, there'll be more producers than just, and the smaller the project, there'll be maybe one producer having to wear all the hats. So with that in mind, for you personally, what aspects of producing do you look forward to the most? And what aspects of producing do you hope colleagues might take the lead on so you don't have to?
I love the business side of it. I think coming from distribution, and seeing, having worked for Warner Brothers, having worked for 20th Century Fox, and seeing that side and seeing how films find their audience. Yeah, I love approaching the projects that I work on with that mentality. So I know that there will be an audience for it. So I think about the end product and how we would market it. Who is it for at the very start? Sometimes at the treatment stage before we even have a script, and shape it so that it does make it easier when we get to the packaging stage, and then once the film is made, to the selling of it. I could, as much as I like being on set, it's probably my least favorite part.
Really?
Yes, most of the time. The productions that I worked on were probably sub 4 million.
Okay.
So when you have less money, you tend to have more problems because you have to, make that money work and spend as much of it on screen as possible. But it means that whenever I would step on set, people would just come to me with problems. So as much as I would love to just sit by the monitor, I was usually just stuck in a production office on just my calendar would be full of meetings with heads of departments moaning. So
I see what you're saying.
That is, if I could be in the privileged position of sitting by the monitor with my name on the chair and headphones and listening to the action, that would be a dream. But I think on the first feature, I think I managed to sit down for probably 5 minutes, and it was night shoots only. So it was not my favorite experience. I think this is why I moved and did commercials and other types of things, because then I really, the experience is very different. But on a film set, yes, it can be challenging.
I can imagine. So finally then, each chapter has, as I alluded to earlier, has a checklist. And I think, having read other practical books to do with film and TV, these go beyond just the simple summarizing what you just read. They really do put you, the reader, under some scrutiny about how serious you are about the vocation of the producer. They're both practical and what was interesting, sort of career building driven, which obviously is a promise for the book anyway. I mean, for example, chapter 10, TV types and genre, the book says, decide what appeals to you about the business of making TV and go into each relevant type deeply. Tell me about why it was important to end each chapter this way.
This was a decision we made very early on. And that checklist, and actually the first, I think the first draft of the book had even more checklists. I love a checklist. I think both Steve and I are fans of lists and ticking things off as a producer. I think that comes with the territory.
Yeah.
But I also met with a lot of students, and especially those that are, all of those are new to this job, and they always petrify that they're going to forget about something crucial at each stage. So, whether they're still developing the story, whether they on set, what are the things that they don't want to miss? And I think that was the aim with the checklist at the end of each book, so that if you are in that development phase of your project, you can pretty much just skip to that checklist and just sense check that you are covering all the bases during that phase. And so it doesn't just cover the chapter that obviously we will allude in some of the points, but we didn't want it to be repetitive. We wanted those checklists to be very useful. And if you just want to, and I hope that sometimes if you just read the checklist, it will then entice you to go back to the chapter and read a bit more and understand why those things are in there. So they work together, but they also, the chapters and the checklist also can work on their own.
Indeed. I mean, I think as well, and just to add, the part of the read is also some really helpful infographics. I mean, if the old adage, sometimes, a picture can paint 1,000 words and all that. I'm thinking of like you're in chapter 6, making a film, the off and on post-production workflows, the chapter 14 about the multi-camera studio operation. I mean, there you've just get the image there at a glance. You can just see the amount of people you can expect to be working with on what supposedly is something happening in one room.
Indeed. And yeah, the infographics were so important. It was actually Steve's son that helped us create those bespoke infographics, because we we knew exactly what we need them to visualize, but there really wasn't anything out there. If we wanted to sort of get inspiration from other books or resources online, we were shocked how little visual representation we could find. So hopefully, again, this is something that will help.
Thank you for sharing that insight into producing film and television, First In, Last Out, published by Routledge. Routledge have given us a unique discount code, which I will include in the show notes with a link to the book. And now we can move seamlessly into 3 films that have impacted everything in your adult life. Are you ready for this?
I am. Can't wait.
For those that haven't heard it before, the rules are simple. Alex has given me 3 films. I'll do them in the order that she has given me. And we have 5 minutes per film to look at why these films are so memorable and maybe what impact they had on her and her life and maybe her career as a filmmaker. So every time we hear this sound, you can hear that okay at your end?
Yes.
Good. Every time we hear that sound, it's not DEFCON 1. It is just that 5 minutes have elapsed and that we will move on to the next film. First choice is Jean-Pierre Jeunet's 2001 quirky feel-good rom-com Amelie, which arguably launched the star on the rise, Audrey Tautou, into the mainstream. I mean, she had many credits before that film, but I think the mainstream hadn't really heard her. And what I mean by that is, I guess, the non-French speaking world got to know who Audrey Tautou is. Amelie is about a young waitress caught up in her own imaginative world and is helping other people find happiness. But in her quest to spread joy, she finds, rather awkwardly, true love of her own. Fun fact, and I thought this was a nice fun fact from a producing point of view, because I could imagine this wouldn't have been something that you could have anticipated, and therefore the cost would have come in. Audrey Tautou doesn't know how to skip stones. So the stone skipping scene were done with special effects.
I did not know this. And it's such a vital part.
It's wonderful, isn't it? Yeah. It's like, I mean, obviously, all actors will say, yes, I can ride a horse. Yes, I can abseil a building. But the idea of not being able to skip a stone is quite funny. The main colours...
That is such a skill.
Indeed. The main colours in the film, green, yellow and red, are inspired, I didn't know this before, inspired by paintings of Brazilian artist Juarez Mercado. But tell us, Alex, where do you first see it? Where does this film hit you, and why is it so memorable, and what impact does it have on you?
So I fell in love with it as soon as it came out. I think I was born in Poland, and until I was 20, I lived there. So European cinema, Polish cinema was definitely more important to me than any Hollywood blockbuster. So as I was growing up, I only watched Star Wars many, many years after it came out, because as a child and as a teenager growing up, we weren't as exposed. Those films were out. I was living in a smaller town, so by the time they came in to us, it was definitely bit longer. It took a bit longer. Whereas European cinema was always loved and at the forefront of marketing, I'd say, even to Polish audiences. So a lot of the films that I hold dearly are European films and Polish films that I grew up on. I unfortunately, when I moved when I was 20, I still follow what's happening in the Polish cinema and European cinema, but it's so interesting how the impact of US on UK market, as well as UK films, obviously. So wherever you live, it does change. So I would say I am 40 now, and the latter 20 years have definitely been dominated by UK speaking cinema. So Amelie is important on many levels. I fell in love with the character. I think that love letter to small joys in life, How she would celebrate the magic of the spoon cracking into a creme brulee, or those are such unique moments that very romantic on one level, but something that really resonated with me, and that we don't do enough. That optimism that she had, but also she was hiding behind those gestures of goodwill, maybe that rather than being able to orchestrate her own story. So, and that obviously took the longest. So I loved the plot. I love how nuanced it was. I loved the quirkiness of the character, but also the colors, the cinematography. All of it felt like such a beautiful. Well, now as a producer, I would say package, but it does have many meanings. So. It definitely was the first time where I thought, it would be so interesting to step on set of something like this. And I remember many, many years after, when I was working at 20th Century Fox, we managed to visit the set of Fantastic Mr. Fox.
Okay.
And obviously a very different film, but it was also the magic of that. And it was all miniatures and just incredible on so many levels. So strangely, it reminded me.
5 minutes are up, I'm afraid. Do you want to finish your thought?
It just reminded me of the joy of small things packaged beautifully, I would say.
Indeed. And and to my embarrassment, I only saw it for the first time last year.
What a joy, though, to discover it.
Indeed.
Now.
Indeed. But also what was interesting was it's a film ahead of its time, because it's impossible not to read it now without the kind of greater awareness of neurodivergence and all that kind of thing. But when I read, I then had to read about that to see whether that was intended. And the filmmakers still say that was never their intention. It was just it was not, it wasn't explicit intention. But I think it's hard not to see the film in that light. But I'll bow to the filmmakers' authority on that one. Right then, Alex, for your second choice, we're going to jump 2 years to 2003 to a film that I believe is pronounced Cialo. Is that right?
Correct. Yeah, Cialo.
Cialo, aka The Body, co-directed by Thomas Konecki and Andrzej Saramonowicz. Is it?
Very good.
Who also wrote,
not easy.
Who also wrote the screenplay too. It's a Polish black comedy, for anybody wondering why I'm falling over words. About a thief who accidentally finds a dead man on a train as he needs to avoid involving the police. He figures the best way to resolve this macabre situation is to remove the body himself. Now, I've not seen this film, and I'm looking forward to hearing what you've got to tell us about it, but I did read around it, and somebody had written that it was like a Polish version of Ted Kotcheff's Weekend at Bernie's, and it has the energy and humour of a Guy Ritchie movie. So tell me, why does this film have... Because if you're saying you're 40 and at 20 you came to Britain, then this is a film that sort of straddles that time, doesn't it?
It does. And actually, funnily enough, when it came out, I fell in love with the comedy. Saramonowicz is a fantastic comedy writer.
Okay.
And so pretty much anything that he touches we know that it's going to be funny and great. So it was highly anticipated and it didn't disappoint. So it's that wonderful combination when that happens. They also he wrote another film called Testosterone. There's another film called Ladies. They're all very, very good comedies. And funnily enough, I would say, obviously, it's great. It's funny. It's very Polish, but I can see The Weekend and Bernie's, obviously, very similar in many ways. And the Guy Ritchie reference, I've not heard that before, but it makes perfect sense.
It does make sense, does it?
Yes, it does.
Okay,
it does.
Good.
It's in just the way it's shot. It's spot on. It's that perfect blend of humor, the performances, the farce, those things that, why do we go to the cinema and want to see, especially comedies with large crowds of people? That film really reminded me why I absolutely love going to the cinema. And actually, many years later, I tried to adapt it into English. And I hired a screenwriter. I got the rights from Saramonowicz to make it into English language. And I really tried to get it packaged and financed. And it was just a bit too unique. And it's still one that got away a little bit. And I'm still hoping, because it's not been done, that those rights effectively are still out there to be picked up. So it really is. There are so many scenes in that film that are very funny. And the script that we have for it in English is also very funny. It still needs a little bit of work, but it's definitely on its way. And we need comedy now more than anything else, probably, in terms of genres that would bring people together, and especially at the cinema, because I feel like, we don't watch enough films at the cinema. And I'm guilty of that. As a young parent, a parent of a young, maybe not a young parent myself, a parent of a young child, my movie going is mainly to see kids' films.
So in terms of Poland, then, is this a successful film? Is this a well-known film?
Very successful. Yes, everyone will, especially my age, millennials and above. Yeah. I wonder if Gen Z should, because it's one of those staple films that it's very good and cool to know it. Okay. I think there were films that defined generations, and I think this was the one for millennials. There was another film called The Debt, so I would say which is a drama. I would say The Body and The Debt were two that were hugely influential. And then Sex Mission is a film for the boomers, I would say. And that's the comedy of that generation. And so, it's quite an important one.
So having sort of lived in Britain for sort of 20 years then, and looking back at this film, what do you see as Polish humour that's maybe, I mean, it obviously can translate if you're trying to adapt it, but what do you think is the difference?
So there's one scene, for instance, when the body goes on a road and they take it to different places. And at one point they're at a church. Yeah. And they're trying to rob the church of anything that they can find that's valuable. So whether it's the chalice or whatever. At the same time, their car tires get stolen.
Finish your story, please. Finish your story.
So it's the fact that they're thieves. They're stealing from a church. At the same time, other set of thieves is stealing the tires of their car. Is just such a, not to say that Polish people steal, we don't, but the humor of that, of just how inept some of maybe Polish thieves are or were at the time.
There's an element of karma to that as well, isn't there?
Exactly.
And I'm guessing is religion a big part of Polish culture? Because I imagine robbing from the church and then being robbed yourself is almost like the film is saying God will punish you, kind of thing.
100%. So it's all those elements put into one that scene always sticks in my head. I still giggle when I think about it.
Tremendous. Right then, for your final choice, we're going to 2010 for Darren Aronofsky's sixth feature film, Black Swan, starring Natalie Portman as a talented but unstable ballerina on the verge of superstardom, where she is pushed to breaking point by her bullying artistic director, played by Vincent Cassel. The stresses and strains from this warped pursuit of perfection make her lose grip on reality and plunges her into a horrific waking nightmare. Fun fact, and this would be, I imagine, a nightmare on a production front, Natalie sustained many injuries which caused delays to production. The most common injury was her left toe, which had to be restrapped while the cast and crew waited. This delay was so frequent, it was called Natalie Portman's left toe delay, which later got shortened to portmanteau. So, tell us, Why does this film have such an impact on you, and what are the memories associated with it for you?
So at that point, I was already here and I was working for 20th Century Fox, and it was a film that came in for us to release under Fox Searchlight, it was just incredible to be part of that marketing and sales push for it, and how we really, as we were drip fed information about it from the States, everyone just grew more and more excited. And sometimes when that happens, I mean, it's, I remember, some of the films that we were releasing weren't as good as others, but this did not disappoint. So we were so incredibly excited for it to come out. There was I remember the lady that was responsible for marketing of the film did an incredible job in creating these unique posters for Picture House cinemas and independent cinemas that were hand-drawn and were separate from the main release posters. Even the artwork, the UK artwork, the agency that created the poster. So actually being part of that process made me acutely aware what a great marketing campaign can do for a film that may not necessarily appeal to mass audiences. And the film really overperformed on every level. And there was this fear that, especially in the UK, people don't really like ballet, that it's reserved for upper class and, the middle class, and well, not that we're necessarily in the class system, but
No. You're right. Yeah, no, it's not a working class pursuit.
Yes, exactly. Whereas this really appealed to everyone, and that I think what I loved about it was I loved the ballet element of it. I love Natalie Portman. I really love Aronofsky. I think he's such a talented filmmaker. That the horror is her strive for perfection, and how that can be such a monster that she battles with. That was so unique and inspiring, and sometimes we are our worst enemy, and I'm definitely guilty of that. So I would often strive for perfection in many things, and it never quite works. And it's actually those things, it's whenever I show my flaws and I show that I've not done something well. And especially, now in hindsight, and when teaching, I always pass on to the students the things that didn't go to plan. And those are the best lessons learned. So as much as we want to aim. And so I stopped aiming for perfection. I think that's something that I've learned from that film.
Perfect timing. I saw that at a packed Stratford Picture House in East London when it came out. And I remember, what I enjoyed most about it as coming at it as a genre fan is that ostensibly for I guess the first half, as I remember it, it's a drama. But then as Darren Aronofsky starts to drip in the magic realism, you begin to get lost in the mind of this woman's unreal pursuit or unachievable pursuit of perfection, which obviously ballet is such a precise pursuit that you're driven to be perfect, but that's not ever going to be achieved. It's only going to be the best you can do. But in her mind, we get to see. I seem to remember that when the wings first emerged on the back of her, you're like, what the is going on?
Yeah.
And
incredible.
And then all bets were off. Then once you'd escaped our reality and we were in her reality. Weirdly. You could, although tonally very different, you could argue there are parallels with Amelie in terms of your selections because they both play with notions of what is the real world, but then take us into the psyche of a protagonist through the use of magic realism, which film is a brilliant medium for that, because once we understand the rules of what we're watching, it all makes sense. It's not like it has to make perfect sense. It would have been. I imagine from a script development and therefore producing point of view, I can imagine from a writing point of view, it'd be hard to get those balances right, because you could imagine the read of a first person taking hold of it, be like, okay, yeah, but I got the drama, but what's all this what's all this fantasy stuff all about? You know, you can imagine you could lose some people who weren't prepared to go with it, because it is execution dependent in the end once you go into those places, versus a straight drama where we're more grounded. But anyway, that's my little rant at script.
No, I so agree. And that important word of execution dependent, which we all hear all the time. You know, you're in such safe hands with Aronofsky that I think we knew we're in for a treat. But it's still, I remember how much of a treat it was.
Indeed. Well, look, that brings us to the end of 3 films that have impacted everything in your adult life. Thank you for sharing with us, Amelie, Cialo, and Black Swan, and letting us have a little look under the hood of producing film and television, first in, last out, published by Routledge. And I will put a link to the book and a discount code for Britflix listeners. Just gives me to say thank you very much to give us your time on the podcast.
Thank you so much. It was an absolute pleasure, as always.
Do remember to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, follow on Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcasts for more movies that impacted your life. And if you want to, I'd love to know what your favourite movies are, what your fondest movie memories are. So please share your favourite movies that impacted your life on Twitter. Look for @LeightonRocks. And you can always leave me a review, 5-star preferably. And in your review, tell us which 3 films impacted your life. Best ones get read out on the podcast.
Hey there, Hugh from Podderation here, and if you like today's show, we think you'll love Thanks for Playing. Join Matt and Lucas every week as they explore the wide breadth of the world of video games, talking about their favourites, talking about new releases, talking about old classics, talking about everything that makes video games some of our favourite hobbies out there. If you'd like to learn more, check out our website at podderation.com.